While exploring the swamps to the western edge of Point Lookout, we see a large wooden house off in the distance. This is Blackhall Manor. Outside the manor, we see many of the strange totems we've become accustomed to here in Point Lookout. The dolls hanging from nooses, the doll heads stuck on pikes. These totems are in the trees, they line the road, and we even find them on the front porch of this house. But who put them here? Were they placed by the swamp folk, or perhaps by this manor's owner? Upon entry, we arrive in a large foyer. There are plant roots on the ground, and only one container here, a dresser to the north. To the left, there's a doorway that leads to a kitchen. We see more vines lining the floor and the walls. There are a few minor containers here, no interesting loot, and we see a door that leads back outside to Point Lookout. Well, we'll go outside after we finish exploring the house. Back out of the kitchen to the foyer, we can head northwest to go down a long hallway. And looking to the right, we see a grand staircase leading to the second floor and a man. The man sits in a wheelchair, bathed in light, pouring from the southern windows.
Keep your distance. What are you doing in my house?
This house looked abandoned. I just wandered in.
Well, Blackhall Manor isn't abandoned. Not yet. At least have the grace to come speak with her owner properly.
Nice curtains. Could you try not to bleed on them when I kill you?
Tough, are you? Good. I might have use for that. Come, let's talk.
He beckons us forward for a closer audience.
Good, good. People should be able to sit and have a conversation, especially in times like these. Civil discourse, the greatest of our lost arts. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
I'm glad you think so. Conversation is but one of the virtues that separate us from cretins like those swamp folk.
Not really. I usually bludgeon first and ask questions never.
Ha! Spoken like a true roughneck. That's good. I could use a person of metal like yourself. You see, a family heirloom of mine has been stolen. This heirloom, a book, has been stolen by those swamp folk cretins. Smash some heads, bring it back, get paid. What do you say?
What do I get in the bargain?
Cash, plain and simple. Return with the book, and I'll pay you 1,000 caps. No questions asked.
Not interested.
The offer stands for now, though I won't abstain from soliciting other help.
Well, I've been thinking about it. Do you still want me to help getting your book back?
Yes, a task for which I think you'll be superlatively qualified. Do you accept?
Okay, I'll get it back.
Good. The fools who stole it believe it has powers, so the thing is probably well guarded. There's a ritual site east of the boardwalk, in the basement of a ruined house. I think you'll find it there. Bring it back to me, and be paid.
And with that, we begin the quest, The Dark Heart of Blackhall. So what should I be doing again, Obadiah?
Don't be daft. You agreed to retrieve my book. With more haste than this, I would have thought. You need to head to the ritual site east of the boardwalk and expect a fight.
Tell me about Blackhall Manor.
I don't suppose there's any harm indulging you. What interests you?
How old is this place?
Hundreds of years, and still standing strong. You're within a fine example of Victorian architecture, my friend.
So your family is named after the house?
Just as much as it's named after us, I suppose. We took the Blackhall name when we arrived on these shores, generations before the Great War. We do well to remember history, particularly in this dark time.
You really seem to hate the swamp folk.
I suppose larceny isn't enough reason to hate.
Are these swamp folk dangerous?
You must be new here if you don't know the answer to that by now. Yes, they're dangerous. They shoot at, smash, or try to eat anything that isn't them. And half the time they shoot at each other. They may have been men once, but no more.
So by swamp folk, do you mean the people living in the Arkandov Cathedral?
No, not them. That lot wants for brains, but they're at least somewhat civilized. The swamp folk have no creed, no morals.
Why did they take your book?
They think the book has a kind of occult power. Superstition and nonsense, of course.
All right, well, I gotta be going now.
Don't get yourself killed.
Obadiah sits in what at one time must have been a grand library. Every inch of every wall is covered with bookshelves. But sadly, most of the books have vanished over the last 200 years. All that remain are burned and ruined books. Using the grand staircase to head up to the second floor, we get our first indication that something may not be right about this place. We see a human skull sitting on a pedestal. But there's no accounting for taste in art, I suppose. Maybe he's just fascinated by human anatomy. The second floor, like the first, is covered wall to wall with bookcases, with no loot of interest. To continue exploring, we can go out a western doorway. We arrive in a hallway where we see some mannequins and suitcases, old containers. There's a baby carriage with some toys and cherry bombs inside, a wardrobe with a whole bunch of pre-war clothing, and 230 darts. A stack of junk and containers to the southeast, and here we find a stairway going down. But before going down, we can finish exploring this top floor. We find another bedroom to the west. This must have been a nursery. We find a stroller and a baby carriage here with a chair sitting next to it. Heading out, we can loot a very easy locked footlocker in the hallway, and inside we find a small stash of ammunition and caps. There's also 3 Nuka-Cola and 2 Stealth Boys. The doorway to the southwest leads to a large bedroom. We find 2 wardrobes in here, each with a wide selection of pre-war clothing, and at the end of the hallway we find another stash of containers. There's a teddy bear laying on the ground, and that's all we find of interest. Heading out and turning east, we see a bathroom. We find some chems lying on a vanity, Psycho Med-X, and a couple bottles of scotch. Down the hall from here is the master bedroom. A large room. We find a stash of 80 bottle caps in one of the desks, and then 2 dressers to loot with more pre-war clothing. There's an average locked wall safe beneath a painting here. Inside we find a small collection of caps and some energy cells. That appears to be it for this floor, so heading down that stairway, we find ourselves in the hallway that led to Obadiah's big library. So turning left, we can go north down the hallway to explore the rooms we missed earlier. The room to the west is the, billiard/dining room. There's a billiard table in the middle of the room, covered in balls. Interestingly, they seem to have really enjoyed using the solid 2 ball. We find 3 of them here, but the billiard table is covered in blood and cutlery, meaning it has most recently been used as a dining table. There is another bookshelf covering the wall to the southwest, but otherwise this room is empty. Heading out, we can explore the room directly across, and it looks like this was intended to be the formal dining room. We see a large formal dining room table here, but it's been pushed against the wall. We see a few places set out, but also TVs and typewriters and lamps, giving us the impression that it was used as an office for a time. And with that, we fully explore Blackhall Manor. So, time to go get the Krivbekne. We can go out the main door or the side door in the kitchen. We'll go out the side door because we haven't seen that yet. This lets us out just outside the manor in a swamp, but as we leave, a woman named Marcella races up to us.
Wait a moment. I need to know. Has Obadiah sent you in search of a book?
Maybe. So what if he has?
Please, you don't understand what it is you're sent to fetch. That book, the Krivbekne, is a thing of evil.
Yeah, he has, as a matter of fact.
I thought as much. Listen to me very carefully, child. You mustn't bring it to him. That book is known as the Krivbekne, and it's a thing of evil purpose.
I don't know what you're talking about, woman. Step aside.
I will not be dismissed by you. That book has been lost to the Blackhalls for generations, and I intend to make sure it stays lost.
Krivbekne? What are you on about?
Yes, the Krivbekne. The Blackhall family has a long, evil history with the book. It was lost to them long ago, but it's found a way back to Point Lookout, and Obadiah seeks to reclaim it.
Why do you want it so badly?
Obadiah's no better than the heathens he's asked you to steal it from. He believes he can use it to control them, and God knows what else. There's a way to destroy that damned thing. I intend to do just that.
Well, Obadiah is paying. How about you?
I can't promise you money, but I have some medical supplies I can share. Please, it would be a good thing you do.
All right, well, if I recover the book, I'll consider bringing it to you.
I ask no more. You can find me at my tent on the beach, south of Blackhall. God bless your path, child.
With that, she runs off. If we follow her, she leads us south-southeast until the marshes end, and we follow her south past the Ophi clan plot until we arrive at the disaster relief outpost pitched in the sands on the beach just west of Pilgrim's Landing. Marcella enters one of the tents, and we can follow her inside.
Please, there's nothing for us to discuss until you retrieve that book from the ritual site. You must hurry.
Well, before I agree to give you the book, I'd like to know more about your beliefs.
Would you like me to recite some scripture? Or did you just want to know more about the faith?
Scripture?
Scripture. The world as told in the Bible. Would you like to hear a verse?
Yeah, let's not do that.
Oh, of course, my child. Something else then?
If we choose that option, however, we can't get her to recite any scripture ever again. So instead we can say, sure, let's hear it. And she begins by quoting us John 5:24.
I'm afraid I don't have a copy of the scripture with me, but I can share a few passages. Here's one of my favorites. I tell you the truth. Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be condemned. He has crossed over from death to life.
Next, she quotes John 16:33.
I have told you this so that you might have peace in me. In the world you will have trouble, but take courage. I have conquered the world.
The next one she quotes is 1 Corinthians 15:52.
In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall rise again incorruptible, and we shall be changed.
And her final verse is John 1:4.
In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it.
You know, my mother had a favorite passage from the Bible, Revelations 21:6. Do you recognize it?
Of course. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. So lovely. Selflessness like that is a rare commodity these days. I can see why that particular passage inspired her.
What exactly is your mission?
We try to improve the state of the wasteland by doing good where we can and by spreading the word of the Bible. We also recover and restore religious relics that we can find, but that's a secondary goal.
How did you become a missionary?
I was raised at the Abbey of the Road, where I was educated until I could receive my rites of mission. That's when I first left the Abbey.
That sounds like just another cult to me.
No, not exactly. People have clung to many beliefs since the Great War, and some have their foundations in the faith. The Bible was around long before the bombs fell, as was my faith. To us, the war was a great tragedy, but not the true apocalypse.
All right, well, let's talk about something else.
That book is of the utmost importance. We shouldn't be chatting idly.
What do you think about Point Lookout?
I'm relatively new here myself, but I'll share what I can.
What are your thoughts on the locals?
Hostile, in a word. I try to observe, but the swamp folk are dangerously aggressive to any outsiders. Lucky for us, they tend to keep to the swamp.
What do you make of all of the bones and dolls on sticks around here?
Swamp folk fetishes or totems, they probably mark territorial lines or maybe are involved with rituals of some kind. I've read about a lot of primitive beliefs that use similar symbols. Voodoo magic, Santeria, Obeah. Fascinating, if somewhat disturbing. Though the underlying beliefs seem quite dark, I'm not sure they're anything more than an empty set of traditions to the swamp folk.
Did you set this campsite up?
Sort of. The tents were collapsed when I found them. I was able to put them back together. This one smells the least like a wet Brahmin. I restored a terminal in one of the other tents. From that, it would seem that these tents were originally put here before the war by medical workers.
So did you say that you weren't from around here?
I come from the Abbey of the Road. I'm what you might call a missionary. I travel the wastes, spreading the faith and doing good where I can.
All right, thanks, Marcella. I'll be leaving now.
Go with great care.
Marcella has her own private terminal, sitting on a table right next to this annoyingly loud generator, and we are free to read it. Private Field Journal, S. Marcella J., Abbey of the Road, Point Lookout Expedition. And here she quotes John 8:12, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me walketh not in the darkness, but shall have the light of life. She has notes on the locals, and she's been keeping a travel journal. Reading her notes on the locals, she has an entry on Obadiah Blackhall. Met local by name of Obadiah Blackhall. He lives in an old manor by himself, Class A manipulator. He solicited me to recover a book, which he claimed to be a family heirloom. The man gives me a bad feeling. I want to investigate this book and his connection to the swamp folk of the region, but he was reluctant when pressed for more information. Update. Confirmed Blackhall connection with regional beliefs. Appears that a recent ancestor to Obadiah, named Constance Blackhall, acquired obscure text known as Krivbekne. Not good. Have heard mention of the book before. Must destroy. This is all the information we find in the game about Obadiah's family, but there's a whole lot more that we learn from the Fallout 3 official game guide. We don't know if Constance was Obadiah's mother, grandmother, so we're not sure exactly when she lived, but while alive, Constance used her family fortune to acquire archaic texts and artifacts, including the Krivbekne. Legend has it that the Krivbekne had a power that artificially extended the lifespan of Constance. As Constance grew older but did not age, people began to notice. She then stylized herself as a priestess and attracted a small group of devotees with whom which she would partake in dark rituals. Legend further says that it was during her lifespan that the Krivbekne was taken. Without the power that this book allegedly gave her, her immortality vanished and her long life ended. So when Obadiah asks us for the book, he's asking for a book that was stolen from his ancestors generations ago. Marcella's next entry is on Tobar the Ferryman. Ferryman quite a character, dubious on the faith, but tolerant at least to hear my ministrations. Seems there's quite a bit more to the man, and he certainly isn't without the smell of sin about him. We'll visit periodically while in Point Lookout to preach if he'll have me. In the next one, on tribal culture at the cathedral, tribal culture occupies major sanctuary to the faith in the region. Cathedral of the Dove. Would love to mine the location for artifacts or any intact texts. But residents openly ostracize outsiders. They've offered to induct me into their tribe. It's tempting to undertake their oaths as a ruse to gain access, but moral reservations are too great. That's all the notes she has on the locals. Going back one, we can next read her travel journal. Her first entry is on the pit. Took shelter with a merchant caravan during a windstorm. More worrying tales from the pit. I wonder if my purpose will take me there one day. For now, I must continue eastwards to the Commonwealth. In the next one, leaving the Commonwealth, I've done what good I can here. Need to get out before it catches up with me. Was able to barter passage on a boat heading south. Don't know where I'll end up, but that's the nature of his work. In the final one, sojourn in the capital wasteland. Tobar tied the Duchess up in the capital wasteland. I spent the afternoon trading at a place called Rivet City. Broke bread with a Father Clifford. Inspirational to see another believer of the faith. Must make my way back here soon. And that is the end to Marcella's notes. There is a very hard-locked safe to the southwest, but we'll leave this alone for now. We can head out of her tent to explore the others here in her campsite. It's interesting to know that Tobar made regular trips to the Commonwealth, and that there Marcella spent time ministering to people. And it sounds like while there she may have made some enemies. I wonder with whom? Most of these tents are empty, filled with a few minor containers and a few places to sleep. Almost every tent has a first aid kit inside, but the most interesting tent is to the northeast. This was the administration tent. Here, we can loot 2 ammunition boxes and 2 first aid kits before reading a terminal on a desk. Collective Benevolence, Volunteer Unit, Nonprofit Charter, St. Mary's County, Point Lookout. Here we find 3 entries. The first, Unit Mission Parameters. Evaluate medical and social needs of local populace, raise awareness of health risks, and provide aid on a local need basis. assist with Federal Fitness Registry compliance program. Volunteers must always uphold the standards of the Collective Benevolence Program in public and private. In the next one, New Plague Public Information, we find a section on The New Plague and You, copyright and distributed by Presidential Fitness Program 2059. And the first one, Know the Signs of the New Plague. Safeguard yourself and your community by knowing how to identify a person suffering from the new plague. Common symptoms include profuse sweating, unexplained contusions and/or swelling, massive external hemorrhaging, and new ideals, such as socialism. In the next one, remember to CIR. When you believe you've come into contact with a person exhibiting one or more of these telltale signs, remember to CIR. C. Confirm symptoms. Approach the person suffering from symptoms if no civil or medical professional is available to do so. Verify that the subject is exhibiting symptoms of the new plague. I. Isolate. Once it has been established that a case of new plague may be present, separate yourself and the person exhibiting symptoms from the general population, as the new plague is notoriously contagious. R. Report. Report directly to the nearest Federal Fitness Registry or medical center and let professionals handle it from there. In the next entry, protect yourself. The new plague is what's commonly known as a social disease. This means that the new plague is especially contagious and can be commonly caught in the course of social interactions, such as ice cream socials, cruising Main Street, promiscuous activity and/or sodomy, and attending fairs or festivals. So, what's the best protection against social diseases? Why not stay home and enjoy a novel or home-cooked meal? Limiting your exposure to other individuals is the best and most surefire way to avoid contracting the new plague. In the final entry on this section, get registered. Did you know that your government can protect you from the new plague and other biological dangers? It's true, and all you need to do is visit your local Federal Fitness Registry. Friendly federal professionals will be on hand to take a few minor samples and to enter you into the National Registry. Your compliance with the Federal Registry program not only keeps medical professionals up to date on your medical history and status, but contributes to valuable research programs and makes you eligible for special prizes, such as fuel rations or vacations to exotic domestic locales. So the inhabitants of Point Lookout before the war were suffering from something called the New Plague. I wonder if this might have had anything to do with the unique strain of biological mutations we find here. In the final entry on this terminal, we find a series of unit logs from the unit stationed here. Log entry number 1. Arrived with first carload of volunteers today. Federal presence is nil. I guess the registry program came and went here at some point. There's some leftover equipment from them I've been authorized to remove from storage and use. We've got some basic antibiotics and hygiene supplies, and a couple boxes of new plague awareness pamphlets. Not much to work with yet, but we were at least able to get settled into the motel. For now, I'll focus on setting up our outreach center with Victoria while the rest of our volunteers get into the community and get a feel for their situation here. In log entry number 2, the location we were given as our outreach center was a joke. The place is half built, and what's been put together so far looks like it's going to fall in on itself any time. The real estate company wasn't much help. I set up a request for some field supplies so we can set up an outdoor center until this situation can be improved upon. My volunteers are telling me that a lot of the area lacks basic infrastructure, so we'll probably want to get started with some basic vaccines and sanitation supplies. I included some of this on today's purchase request, but I don't feel like we've got enough of a grasp on the local situation to request much more than that just yet. In log entry number 3, we staged our first outreach event today, which didn't go well. The majority of the population in the central area of Point Lookout are transplants from nearby urban centers. Lots of contracted construction workers, support staff for local businesses, a handful of business people involved in the construction projects. We are here to help the rural population who don't have a pot to piss in, but these people don't seem to come into town. We need to reevaluate our efforts. The local populace seems reclusive. We'll have to get creative with our outreach. In the final entry, log number 4, Victoria was badly wounded today. She took a truck of supplies out to the Arkandov Cathedral beyond the river. Most of the locals we want to help are living in primitive dwellings in the wetlands. The cathedral offered the closest public building to that area. She wasn't in much state to give details, but it sounds like nobody was around when she arrived. She ventured into the swamps to try to make contact with the locals at one of the shacks out there. The paramedics are treating a wound on the back of her head. She'll be okay, but it sounds like her skull was fractured. Victoria doesn't remember anything beyond blacking out. There was nothing stolen from her person or the medical supplies, but I'm still going to err on the side of caution and forbid volunteers from wandering out there alone. We'll do the best we can from here. This is the best evidence we have so far as to the nature of the locals here in Point Lookout from whom the swamp people descended. Even before the bombs, the natives to Point Lookout were poorly educated, reclusive, distrustful of outsiders, didn't come into the towns. They were possibly infected with the new plague. They weren't getting the medical treatment that they needed, and they were violent. It was they who murdered the poor pilot whose corpse we found hanging in the tree at the jet crash site in yesterday's video, and they attacked poor Victoria here. All of these things I think can help explain why the swamp people of Point Lookout are some of the most unique enemies we find in the Fallout universe. Now, before we can give the Krivbekna back to Obadiah or to give it to Marcella, we must first retrieve it. To do so, we need to head to the ritual site, which we find just off the road that we follow east when heading towards Calvert Mansion. As is to be expected, the entrance to the ritual site is guarded by swamp folk. After clearing the area, we see that the ritual site is part of an old, blasted-out pre-war home. The area is surrounded by a bunch of doll heads on spikes, and to reach it, we open a hatch to the cellar. Here we find a large cellar with not a whole lot of loot anywhere. There's a big pile of bloody water on the ground and a hole in the wall to the east. This leads us to some sort of torch-lined pathway. We see the limestone we would come to expect to the right, but to the left we see the foundations of some sort of grander structure, which is strange because we found this place beneath a ruined pre-war house. This architecture doesn't look anything like we find in pre-war America. It almost looks like some sort of ancient temple. As we continue along the pathway lined with a whole bunch of brain fungus, we turn a corner to go downhill where we find a split. The path continues down to the left, or we can turn right towards a campfire. Campfire leads to another one of these perplexing temple walls. Just beyond this wall, we see a coffin lying on top of a rubble pile. Inside, we find the coffin's owner and a Nuka-Cola Quantum, which is strange considering Nuka-Cola Quantum was released to the world the day the bombs dropped. Not sure how that gave people enough time to bury it with the dead. In the coffin, we also find a number of stim packs. The path continues on to the south and ends at a large chamber supported by Doric columns. Again, another feature we would not expect in the ruins of pre-war America. The floor bubbles in toxic mud. We see a few totems set up and an open safe in the southwestern corner. Here we find some moonshine and a stealth boy. This may be a hint. We may need to use this stealth boy later. But otherwise, this was a dead end, so we need to retrace our steps and go back down the other path we passed earlier. This brings us deeper into the earth. Following the wall of this strange underground temple, the path splits again, going deeper into the earth or going straight ahead. Taking the path going deeper, we arrive at a little nook where we see a party having dinner. A table is laid out with cutlery. The only food we see is punga fruit, though we do find a bottle of wine and a few empty bottles of milk and Nuka-Cola. A skeleton sits in a chair, surrounded by some of those little dolls on cinder blocks, and a gnome standing to the left, observing the feast. I can't explain how this scene would craft itself naturally. I suppose this may have been set out by some very creative swamp folk. But this is a dead end, so we need to go back uphill and continue along the original path. Until at length, we arrive at a large vaulted room lit by torches. We see a dark pool on the ground, and against the northeastern wall we find a grisly scene. On an altar we find a recently skinned corpse. There are stim packs and punga fruit and cherry bombs at the feet of this corpse, and we find a doll stabbed through the head into the altar with a ritual knife, which is the most powerful kitchen knife in the entire game. It has a damage of 6 compared to the kitchen knife's 4, bringing its DPS up to 18. It also has 3 times the critical chance multiplier of any other kitchen knife, and it has the second lowest AP cost of any weapon in the game, allowing you to attack incredibly quickly with the weapon. Next to this altar is a ceremonial lectern. Inside we find a human skull and a book with a large gash on its cover. To loot the book, we activate the ceremonial lectern. The large tome set into this lectern must be the Krivbekne. It is damp with what appears to be fresh blood. We can leave it or take it. If we choose to take it, we get rushed by behind from swamp folk. As we leave the ritual chamber, we begin to hear whispered voices. Are we leaving these voices behind, or are they coming with us? We now have to fight our way out of the ritual site as wave after wave of swamp people attack. At last we've reached the hatch, and we can exit safely to Point Lookout. With the tome in hand, we now have a choice. Take it to Obadiah, or take it to Marcella. We'll go over both endings, but I'll start by taking it to Marcella. As we arrive at the disaster relief outpost, we find it swarming with smugglers. What were smugglers doing here? We find out when we enter Marcella's tent. Inside, we find Marcella lying dead on the ground. She has suffered a brutal death. She lies amongst puddles of her own blood, with blood spatter on the wall behind her, and someone has used her own blood to write the message, "Die thief." Die thief? What did she steal? She's not a thief. Whoever killed her has rifled through her terminal. We see their bloody handprints on the table and the terminal. On her corpse, we find 5 stim packs and Marcella's safe key. And lying on the table is a holotape. Marcella's last words.
They attacked while I slept. I don't expect to survive. I only pray that that you haven't taken that book to Obadiah. You must take up my mission. There is one way to utterly destroy the Krivbekne, but you must take a pilgrimage far north of Point Lookout in the capital wasteland. Seek a place called Dunwich. Within is an obelisk, itself a wicked thing. It'll consume the book. You need only press the book to its surface. May God shed his blessings upon you, child. Make haste for Dunwich. My God, I am sorry for all my sins with all my heart. In choosing to do wrong and failing to do good, I have sinned against you, whom I should.
She died while reciting a Catholic act of contrition prayer. We can now only hope that she has found peace. Using the key, we can open her safe filled with medical supplies, but even though she promised to reward us for helping, we lose karma by looting her safe with her key. So we still have the Krivbekne, and Marcella is dead, and somebody accused her of being a thief. Only one culprit comes to mind. Heading back to Blackhall Manor, we can confront Obadiah Blackhall.
The book. You found it. Quickly, give it to me.
I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet.
Surely you're not considering giving it to Marcella. Come now, that woman can't rub two caps together. Give it to me and be paid.
Marcella's dead, you callous prick.
Forgive my indiscretion. Still, with her death, I see no reason for you to keep hold of that book. For all you know, the same fate may befall you.
Well, that sounded like a threat. I'm thinking that perhaps you might have had something to do with Marcella's death.
Can't say that I did. But that's all the more reason you should give the book to me.
We can come back to him at any time.
We had a bargain, Roughneck. Hand the book over and collect your fee.
I still haven't decided what I want to do.
There's no reason in your keeping that book. My book. Talk to me again when you've come to your senses.
Well, if you have the caps, you get the book.
Yes, of course. Here's your errand fee. Now give it to me.
With that, he gives us 1,000 bottle caps, and we hand over the Krivbekne. Almost immediately, he stands to his feet. Was this crippled old man thing a ruse? Or did the Krivbekne give him some sort of restorative power, like legend says it gave to Constance, his ancestor? If we follow him, he walks into the billiard room, whereupon he enters a secret passage. We explored this corner when we were at Blackhall Manor last time, and this entrance was obscured by a bookshelf. At some time between then and now, someone has moved this bookshelf to reveal a staircase leading down into a basement. If we follow him into the basement, we see totems lining the wall. We turn a corner around some cinder blocks to find Obadiah Blackhall kneeling on the ground before an altar covered with the corpse of a swamp person. What on earth is going on here? We find a small alcove to the northeast, a couple of shelves filled with minor loot and a sink, but otherwise there's nothing down here. We can take the opportunity to try and talk with Obadiah.
You are not welcome in this place. You shouldn't be here. Get out of my home.
Shouldn't be here, right. Roger that. I'm out of here.
So leave then.
So Obadiah, I thought all of this occult nonsense was beneath you.
Don't play at what you misunderstand, troglodyte. Get out.
I usually hide my bodies in the river, but this is nice too.
We are nothing alike. More so than you could ever comprehend. Go now. Never return.
We see that this swamp person is not the only one to have died here. We find human skeletons and other human bones lying all over this basement. We have no further interactions with Obadiah, but as always, we can kill him. If we do so, we not only get the 1,000 caps from completing the quest, but we can then loot the Krivbekne from his ashes. Now, what is the most moral option? Well, there's always what he did to Marcella, but did he do that to Marcella? For what reason would he have killed Marcella? He previously tried to hire her to get the book, and she simply told him no. That said, working with mercenaries is his M.O. He hired us as a mercenary to retrieve the book, and smugglers are a little better than mercenaries. Perhaps he hired the smugglers to get rid of Marcella because he knew she was trying to get the book from us, which would make her a thief in his eyes. And his final note to her would make sense. At any rate, if we choose to keep the book, either by never returning to Obadiah or by killing him after giving it back to him, we can now leave Point Lookout. This is it. We've done everything. It's time to bid farewell to this fascinating place. On our way to the Duchess Gambit, we see Nadine waiting for us just where she said she would.
Hey, just in time. Found out who went rooting around in our skulls, and you'll never guess who it was. As a totally unrelated hint, I'm in charge of his boat now.
Wait. Tobar did it?
Yeah, looks like it. When the tribals would send someone to the swamp, he'd be waiting around to nab 'em when the Pungaseeds gassed 'em. He'd do his amateur surgery for the tribals and let us wander back, all in exchange for punga fruit to trade. Sweet little deal he had going on. Anyway, I figured you'd want a shot at some revenge, so I put him under citizen's arrest, sorta.
Oh no, Nadine, what did you do?
I consider it payment for what he did to my poor sliced-up brain. I was gonna do the same to him, but I figured you'd want the honor.
Well, how do I know you're telling the truth?
It sounds pretty wacko, right? Well, I wouldn't have believed me either until I snuck a peek in Tobar's engine room.
What a bastard!
Yeah, he seemed nice enough, didn't he? I wouldn't have figured it out if I hadn't snuck into his engine room while waiting for you. From the look of it, he kept every bit of gray matter he cut out, and he had quite a collection. You can take a look if your stomach's up to it. And while you're in there, feel free to give Tobar my love, preferably with the sharp end of a hot knife.
Ooh, remind me not to mess with you.
Damn right. Now, why can't the rest of the world figure that one out?
So, now what are you gonna do?
First off, I'm claiming this boat. I put Tobar down, so it's mine. Them's the rules of the ocean. So that leaves me with a boat, a load of punga, and a wicked scar. Damn if I haven't earned that adventure I came out looking for. Think I'll take over running this ship. I can travel as I like and always head back to the wasteland to see Mom. Not a bad way to live, huh? Of course, you can always ride for free.
Any chances you're heading home now?
Now that I've got this sweet boat, I guess I could head back home. For a while, anyway. Just wait till Mom sees the haul I'm bringing home.
All right, I'll hop aboard.
Yeah, enough gabbing. Let's move.
With that, Nadine walks to her brand new vessel, and now we can go into the engine room to confront Tobar.
Well, if it isn't my favorite traveler. And oh, what a trip you were on. Why, when you were under, you should have heard some of the things that came out of your mouth. But I suppose you're more interested in what came out of your head, aren't you?
So it's true? Why did you do it?
Why do we do anything? You travel the world, kill people, take trophies that interest you, and move on. I'm much the same. The only difference is that my trophies are somewhat more medical in nature. Oh, and to be honest, I probably kill fewer people than you do. But I suppose it's time that came to an end, one way or another.
You're a dead man, you SOB.
Murder? Really, what would your father say? I thought he raised you better than that. You had an awful lot to say about him when you were unconscious. And from the sound of it, he'd be very, very disappointed in what you've become. Sounds like he didn't spank you enough as a kid. Maybe I can make up for his lost time. Found you. Kill.
Wow, that was pretty brutal, Tobar. Way to not pull any punches. On his body, we find a small stash of caps, a key to the Duchess Gambit, and a unique clothing item called Grifter's Fit. This outfit has decent stats. It grants +1 to charisma and +5 to small guns, and it's got a unique look. It's important to loot this immediately after killing Tobar, because once we leave the engine room, Tobar's body disappears from the game forever. In the engine room, we see jars and jars filled with all sorts of brain parts. This sick man has been collecting all of the anatomy he has excised from the people whom the tribals lured to the sacred bog. And on a table next to a lamp, we find a familiar piece of brain. For some reason, you feel a terrible sense of loss as you look at the familiar lump of gray matter. We can either take it or leave it alone. If we leave it alone, it sits on this table forever, or if we take it, it appears in the miscellaneous section of our inventory as a lump of brain. Thankfully, we can always drop it, which means we can turn this into a decoration for our player home. There's also a hatch in this room, presumably leading to the actual engines, but we can't interact with it. When we're ready to head back to the capital wasteland, we can activate the passenger cot in the cabin. The Duchess Gambit is ready to begin its trip to the capital wasteland. We can choose to stay to finish our business, or to travel to the capital wasteland. 30 days later, we appear back home, and waiting on board is Catherine.
Good to see you again.
I got Nadine back, safe and sound.
Yes, thank you so much. And now that she's got this boat and carrying all this cargo, well, I can afford to actually pay you. Thank you so much.
With that, she gives us a gift of 10 refined punga fruit and 300 caps. I'll be going then.
Thank you so much for your help.
We can now return to Point Lookout at any time for free. But we still have this horrible book, this Kriv Bekna. We now must make a choice. Do we keep the book for ourselves, or do we fulfill Marcella's final wishes and bring it to the basement of the Dunwich building to destroy it? In tomorrow's episode, we will completely explore the Dunwich building and bring the Kriv Bekna to the obelisk. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week on a wide range of topics spanning all of the games, and I'll be finishing up my series here on Point Lookout over the next few days. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss tomorrow's episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook to keep up to date with all Oxhorn news, and if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, for my episode on Dunwich.
Imagine a city in ruins. Its walls, once a source of protection against enemy attacks, now lie completely destroyed. The gates, symbols of security and control over who entered or left, have been burned to ashes. The inhabitants, once a prosperous and revered people, now live in humiliation, exposed and hopeless. This was the reality of Jerusalem during the time of Nehemiah. The people of Israel had endured a long period of suffering. Approximately 70 years earlier, during Babylonian rule, the Temple of Jerusalem had been destroyed, and most of the city's inhabitants were exiled. When the Persian Empire conquered Babylon, King Cyrus allowed the Jews to return to their land and rebuild the temple. This initial return, recorded in the Book of Ezra, marked the beginning of an attempt at restoration. However, even with the temple rebuilt, Jerusalem remained vulnerable because its walls had never been restored. In the ancient world, city walls were more than just physical barriers against attack. They symbolized strength, stability, and the dignity of a people. Without them, Jerusalem was exposed both physically and emotionally. Enemies could invade at will, and the Jewish people, already weakened by exile, lacked a strong sense of national identity. It is in this context that we meet Nehemiah, a man living in Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire. Nehemiah was neither a priest nor a prophet, but an ordinary man with significant responsibilities in the Persian court. He served as the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, a position of immense trust, as it involved tasting the king's wine to ensure it was not poisoned. This role not only brought Nehemiah into close contact with the monarch, but also made him an influential figure. Despite his comfortable and prestigious life in the king's court, Nehemiah did not ignore the plight of his people. He knew that Jerusalem was still in ruins and that the Jews who had returned lived under dire conditions. In the opening chapter of the book bearing his name, Nehemiah recounts a visit from Hanani, one of his brothers who came from Judah. Eager to know the state of his fellow Jews, Nehemiah asked, "How are the remnant that survived the exile, and how is Jerusalem?" Nehemiah 1:2. The response was devastating. In Nehemiah 1:3, Hanani reported, "Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire." These words broke Nehemiah's heart. He immediately understood that without walls, Jerusalem would remain vulnerable, and the people would continue to be demoralized. The situation Nehemiah learned of was not merely a physical problem, but a spiritual one as well. Jerusalem was a symbol of God's presence among his people. Seeing the city in ruins reflected the people's estrangement from their covenant with God. For Nehemiah, the walls were not just stones. Rebuilding them meant restoring the dignity of the people and honoring God's name. Like many of us, Nehemiah faced a situation where he felt something needed to be done. He was not inherently powerful, but he bore a deep sense of responsibility for his people. This connection between Nehemiah and Jerusalem illustrates that God can use anyone to fulfill his purposes, even those seemingly distant from the problem at hand. Have you ever felt called to something greater, even in the face of immense challenges? Nehemiah faced this same sense of calling. He knew he needed to address the situation in Jerusalem, but before taking action, Nehemiah turned to the one who has the power to change all circumstances, God. Nehemiah did not merely hear Hanani's words about Jerusalem's condition, he deeply felt them. He did not respond with indifference. In Nehemiah 1:4, he describes his reaction. "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned, fasted, and prayed before the God of heaven." His response was not just emotional, but profoundly spiritual. Nehemiah did not attempt to act on his own. He brought his pain and concern directly to the God of Israel. Nehemiah's prayer, recorded in Nehemiah 1:5-11, is one of the most remarkable moments in the text. He begins by exalting the greatness of God, acknowledging his sovereignty and faithfulness to his covenant with Israel. In verse 5, Nehemiah proclaims, "Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments." By starting this way, Nehemiah not only glorifies God, but also reaffirms his trust in God's character. He recognizes that the same God who made promises to Israel is capable of fulfilling them. Nehemiah then moves into confession, demonstrating his acknowledgement of the sins of his people. In verse 6 he pleads, "Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you." Nehemiah does not exclude himself from the collective guilt. He identifies with his people, acknowledging their failures to obey God's commands while expressing his desire for transformation. The prayer continues as Nehemiah recalls God's promises through Moses. In verse 8 he says, "Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, 'If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name.'" This reference to Deuteronomy 31:5 reveals Nehemiah's deep knowledge of God's word and his belief in God's unwavering faithfulness, even in the face of human failure. Nehemiah does not appeal to his own abilities or merit, but to God's promise of restoration. After confessing and recalling God's promises, Nehemiah presents his request to the Lord. In verse 11 he pleads, "Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant, and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man." Nehemiah understands that to act, he will need King Artaxerxes' permission, and he trusts that God can move the king's heart to open the necessary doors. Nehemiah does not see prayer as a last resort, but as the starting point of his mission. He fasts and prays continually, placing his dependence on God before taking any practical action. This time of spiritual seeking is crucial because Nehemiah knows the magnitude of the challenge ahead requires more than human planning. It demands divine intervention. God hears Nehemiah's prayer. In chapter 2, verse 1, it is noted that Nehemiah was serving wine to the king, and the king noticed something unusual. Nehemiah was sad. In Persian culture, showing sadness in the king's presence was risky, as it could be interpreted as disrespect. Nehemiah himself admits in verse 2, "I was very much afraid," yet he does not let fear paralyze him. God had prepared both Nehemiah's heart and the king's for this moment. In verse 4, King Artaxerxes asks, "What is it you want?" Before responding, Nehemiah offers a quick prayer to God. This act reflects his constant dependence on the Lord, even under pressure. He then presents his request, permission to go to Jerusalem to rebuild its walls. God's favor is evident in the king's response. In Nehemiah 2:6-8, Artaxerxes not only grants permission for Nehemiah to travel, but also provides letters of authorization for safe passage through various territories and supplies of timber from royal forests. This demonstrates how God was orchestrating every detail, paving the way for Nehemiah to fulfill his calling. Nehemiah's courage in depending on God is a powerful example of faith. He knew that making such a bold request to the king was dangerous, but he trusted that God was in control. Nehemiah did not attempt to resolve Jerusalem's problem with his own resources or influence. He placed everything in God's hands, and the Lord responded extraordinarily. This moment marks the beginning of Nehemiah's journey as a leader in a seemingly impossible mission. He was about to leave the safety of the Persian court to face unknown challenges in a devastated land. However, Nehemiah knew he was not alone. The same God who had heard his prayer would continue to guide him every step of the way. After receiving King Artaxerxes' approval, Nehemiah embarked on his approximately 1,500-kilometer journey from Persia to Jerusalem. In Nehemiah 2:9, he records that he traveled with army officers and cavalry provided by the king. This military escort ensured his protection, as the route was dangerous, filled with bandits and potential enemies. Additionally, Nehemiah carried letters signed by the king guaranteeing safe passage through the territories and authorization to acquire timber from royal forests, as detailed in Nehemiah 2:7-8. The journey was not only long and exhausting, but also daunting, as Nehemiah knew he was heading to a city in ruins, surrounded by adversaries who opposed its restoration. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, Nehemiah did not immediately announce his plans. He remained silent about his mission for 3 days. In chapter 2, verse 11, he states, "I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others." This initial pause likely allowed him to rest, but also to observe and understand the environment before taking action. That night, Nehemiah began a secret inspection of Jerusalem's walls. He wanted to see the extent of the damage firsthand before sharing his vision with the city's leaders. Nehemiah 2:12-15 describes how he went out with only a few men, without informing anyone of his plans, and surveyed the city's perimeter. He carefully examined the broken walls and burned gates, moving cautiously to avoid attracting attention. In Nehemiah 2:13, he narrates, "By night I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire." This nighttime inspection demonstrates Nehemiah's strategic wisdom. He knew that before mobilizing the people, he needed a clear understanding of the work ahead and the resources required. Additionally, acting in secret allowed him to avoid criticism or interference from opponents before he was ready to present his plan. After completing his inspection, Nehemiah summoned Jerusalem's leaders, including priests, nobles, and officials. In Nehemiah 2:17, he shared his vision. "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." By speaking this way, Nehemiah included himself in the people's plight, showing that he was not an outsider giving orders, but someone equally committed to their cause. Nehemiah not only inspired the people with words, but also shared how God had been faithful up to that point. In Nehemiah 2:18 he testified, "I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me." By doing so, Nehemiah demonstrated that his mission was not merely a human plan, but one guided by God from the start. This bolstered the leaders and people's confidence, who responded enthusiastically, "Let us start rebuilding," Nehemiah 2:18. Thus, they united in the work ahead. With the people's support, Nehemiah organized a detailed plan. He divided the reconstruction of the wall into sections and assigned specific parts of the work to different families and groups. Nehemiah 3 is entirely dedicated to describing how the wall was rebuilt, with each verse mentioning a group responsible for a portion of the project. For instance, in chapter 3, verse 1, we see that the priests began the work at the sheep gate. In verse 3, the sons of Hassenaah worked on the fish gate, while verse 8 highlights the involvement of craftsmen and merchants. Nehemiah's strategy was clever. He engaged all classes of society in the work, from religious leaders to ordinary residents. Each group focused on a specific section of the wall, often near their own homes, which instilled a sense of urgency and responsibility. This approach not only sped up the process, but also strengthened the unity among the people who shared a common goal. Nehemiah did not underestimate the importance of planning. He knew that rebuilding Jerusalem's walls would not be a simple task, especially with enemies closely watching. His plan, however, demonstrated that clear and focused leadership, combined with the cooperation of the people and God's guidance, could overcome any obstacle. Nehemiah acted not only as a strategist, but also as a leader who inspired confidence. The work had begun, but Nehemiah knew the challenges wouldn't end there. As the walls started to rise, external threats and internal difficulties also began to surface. Nehemiah's vision and reliance on God would remain essential for navigating the next steps of this journey. Soon after the reconstruction of the walls began, opposition arose. The restoration of Jerusalem deeply disturbed the neighboring peoples, especially those who had taken advantage of the city's weakness. Chief among the opponents were Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. Sanballat was the governor of Samaria, Tobiah was an Ammonite official, and Geshem was an Arab leader. These men joined forces against the project, mocking and attempting to demoralize the workers. In Nehemiah 2:19, it is recorded that Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem laughed at and despised Nehemiah, asking, "What is this you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" This accusation of rebellion was serious, as it could provoke the Persian king to act against Nehemiah and the people. But Nehemiah did not let himself be intimidated. He responded with confidence in God, as seen in verse 20. "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." Nehemiah's response reflects his faith and determination. He understood that the work was not merely human, it was a divine calling. Nehemiah avoided prolonged debates or discussions with his opponents. Instead, he remained focused on the task, trusting that God would be with the people. As the criticism persisted, the people stayed united in their reconstruction efforts. Nehemiah 3 describes how each group took responsibility for a section of the wall, working with speed and efficiency. This organization and dedication allowed the work to progress despite the challenges. The pace was intense, but the people's motivation was fueled by Nehemiah's clear vision and the conviction that they were undertaking a work for God. The mockery from Sanballat and his allies did not stop. In Nehemiah 4:1-3, Sanballat openly ridiculed the efforts, saying, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones." These words were designed to discourage and ridicule the workers, planting doubt in their hearts. Tobiah, equally sarcastic, emphasized that the people's efforts were futile. In response to these provocations, Nehemiah once again turned to prayer. In chapter 4, verse 4, he cried out, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity." Nehemiah did not seek revenge through his own actions. He trusted God to bring justice. This allowed him and the people to stay focused on the work instead of being derailed by the criticism. As the walls began to take shape, the opponents realized that their mockery was having no effect. The people's response was a demonstration of unity and perseverance. Nehemiah 4:6 reports, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart." This statement is a testament to the strength that comes from a shared vision. Each worker, as they placed stones in the wall, knew they were contributing to something greater than themselves. The unity of the people was crucial for overcoming the difficulties. Nehemiah, as a leader, understood the importance of maintaining morale. He consistently reminded the people that they were doing God's work, emphasizing that success depended on divine protection and blessing. This approach not only kept the focus, but also strengthened mutual trust among the workers. The perseverance of the people in the face of external criticism is a powerful lesson. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem represented not only physical opposition, but also the voices of doubt that often try to hinder progress. Nehemiah and the people demonstrated that the best response to criticism is to continue the work with determination and faith. They refused to let words of discouragement become obstacles. Instead, they used those words as motivation to move forward. Even when the opponents intensified their actions, the people did not divide or lose focus. Nehemiah led wisely, encouraging collaboration and ensuring that every worker felt their contribution was essential. This unity was what enabled the work to continue even under pressure. The walls of Jerusalem were slowly being restored, stone by stone, as the people stood firm in their mission. Despite external challenges, their collective vision and faith in God kept them united and motivated. However, the challenges were far from over, and Nehemiah knew that new threats would arise as the work continued. As the reconstruction of the walls progressed, new challenges emerged, this time from within the Jerusalem community itself. The external problems, such as the mockery and threats from enemies, had been overcome through unity and determination. Yet internal conflicts began to surface, threatening the cohesion of the people. In Nehemiah 5:1, it is reported that a great outcry arose among the Jews. Now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. The problems began because many poor Jews were being exploited by their wealthier counterparts. During the reconstruction, many had to abandon their fields to dedicate themselves to the work on the wall, which led to economic hardships. Moreover, a famine worsened the situation, forcing families to take out loans to buy food or pay taxes to the king. In Nehemiah 5:3, some said, "We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine." Others, in verse 4, stated, "We have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards." The wealthy were taking advantage of this situation to exploit the poor. Many were charging exorbitant interest, and when families couldn't repay their debts, they were forced to sell their children into slavery. This practice was not only unjust, but also violated God's law, which forbade usury and commanded the Israelites to care for one another in times of need, as recorded in Exodus 22:25-27 and Leviticus 25:35-37. Nehemiah was deeply angered upon hearing these complaints. In chapter 5, verse 6, he expressed his reaction. "When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry." But Nehemiah did not act impulsively. In verse 7, he explained that he first reflected on the situation before taking action. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and officials. This careful approach demonstrates that Nehemiah acted not rashly, but with wisdom and justice. Nehemiah directly confronted the leaders and the wealthy who were exploiting the vulnerable. He called a large assembly to address the problem publicly. In verse 7, he declared, "You are charging your own people interest." Nehemiah exposed the injustice and appealed to the conscience of those involved. He reminded them that many Jews had been redeemed from slavery during the exile, and it was inconceivable that they were now being enslaved by their own brothers. In verse 9, Nehemiah emphasized the spiritual and moral implications of their actions. What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? He highlighted that the injustice was not merely a social issue, but a spiritual one that dishonored God and weakened the people's testimony before neighboring nations. The response of the people was immediate. The nobles and leaders acknowledged their wrongdoing and promised to restore everything they had taken. Nehemiah 5:12 records their words. "We will give it back and will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say." Nehemiah did not simply take them at their word, but ensured the promise was upheld. He called the priests to formalize the agreement and had the leaders swear an oath to return the property and cancel the debts. This public act strengthened trust among the people and ensured justice was restored. Nehemiah's integrity was crucial at this moment. He led not just with words, but by example. In chapter 5, verse 14, Nehemiah revealed that during the 12 years he served as governor of Judah, he refused the benefits of the position. But out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. While previous governors had exploited the people, Nehemiah chose to serve with humility and dedication. He refused to levy taxes or accumulate wealth at the expense of others. Instead, he worked alongside the people on the reconstruction and even used his own resources to support his team and provide food for others. Nehemiah not only addressed immediate problems, but also implemented structural changes to protect the vulnerable. He established standards of justice and equality that reflected God's law, ensuring that the wealthy would not exploit the poor in the future. His leadership brought stability and restored trust within the community. This episode demonstrates that Nehemiah was not merely a strategist or a wall builder, but a leader deeply committed to social justice. He understood that rebuilding Jerusalem was not only a physical task, but also a moral and spiritual one. Nehemiah showed that true leadership is not about personal gain, but about working for the good of all, especially the most vulnerable. The story of Nehemiah teaches us the importance of leading with integrity and compassion. He did not shy away from confronting injustice, but acted courageously and wisely to correct what was wrong. Nehemiah demonstrated that the unity of the people and obedience to God are essential to overcoming challenges and building a strong and just community. As the walls of Jerusalem neared completion, external enemies intensified their efforts to halt the work. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem realized that criticism and mockery had not discouraged the people and began plotting more aggressive strategies, including the threat of physical violence. In Nehemiah 4:7, it is recorded, "But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry." This anger led to a conspiracy to attack Jerusalem and stop the progress. Nehemiah did not underestimate the seriousness of the threats. He knew the enemies were determined to frustrate the reconstruction, but he did not allow fear to paralyze the people. In Nehemiah 4:9, he recounts the first step he took. "But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat." This combination of prayer and action is one of Nehemiah's hallmarks of leadership. He trusted in divine protection, but also took practical precautions to ensure the workers' safety. As the pressure mounted, Nehemiah noticed that the people were starting to lose heart. The work was exhausting, and the constant threat of attack weighed heavily on the workers. In Nehemiah 4:10, the people voiced their struggles. The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Moreover, in verse 11, the enemies openly declared, "Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work." Nehemiah responded to these threats with wisdom and courage. He reorganized the workers, dividing them into those who would continue rebuilding and those who would be designated for armed protection. In Nehemiah 4:13, he explains, "Therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows." He also encouraged the people, reminding them that they were fighting not only for themselves, but also for their families and their faith. In verse 14, Nehemiah says, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes." Nehemiah's strategy was clear. Maintain focus on the work while implementing defensive measures. Each worker had a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. Nehemiah 4:17-18 describes, "Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other, and each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked." Nehemiah also assigned trumpeters to sound the alarm in case of an enemy attack, ensuring that the people could respond quickly. Despite all these challenges, the work continued. The enemies realized their plans were failing because Nehemiah and the people were always vigilant and well organized. In chapter 6, the opposition tried a new tactic, sending messages to Nehemiah, inviting him to meet them outside the city. This was a trap, as Nehemiah reveals in verse 2, "They were scheming to harm me." Nehemiah responded with firmness and determination. In chapter 6, verse 3, he sent this reply, "I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?" Nehemiah knew his presence was crucial to leading the people, and yielding to these distractions could jeopardize all progress. He did not allow intimidation attempts to divert him from his purpose. The enemies did not give up easily. They sent the same message to Nehemiah 4 times, and when that failed, they tried spreading rumors that Nehemiah was planning to rebel against the king of Persia. But Nehemiah remained steadfast, praying to God for strength and discernment. In chapter 6, verse 9, he cries out, "Now strengthen my hands." This trust in God was essential for Nehemiah to continue leading the people with courage. Active defense and reliance on God were fundamental to the success of the reconstruction. Nehemiah never lost sight of the importance of seeking God in prayer, even as he took practical steps to protect the work. He understood that the mission was not just about building physical walls, but also about restoring the people's faith and identity. His leadership exemplified a balance between spirituality and action, showing that both are vital in times of crisis. With each challenge overcome, the wall of Jerusalem took shape. The enemies were frustrated and the people grew more determined. Nehemiah knew the completion of the work was near, but also that the true restoration of Jerusalem involved more than stones and gates. The spiritual and communal work remained as essential as the construction. After facing external opposition, internal conflicts, and logistical challenges, the Wall of Jerusalem was finally completed. Nehemiah 6:15 records the achievement with simplicity yet depth. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. This was an impressive milestone, not only because of the speed of the work, but also because of its profound significance. It was proof that, with faith in God, cooperation, and determined leadership, what seemed impossible could be achieved. The wall's completion had a profound impact not only on Jerusalem, but also on the surrounding enemies. Nehemiah 6:16 describes, "When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God." This accomplishment was not just a material victory, it revealed God's hand working on behalf of His people. With the walls finished, Nehemiah and Ezra, the scribe and priest, led the people in a spiritual celebration. They understood that Jerusalem's true restoration depended not only on physical walls, but also on spiritual revival. Nehemiah 8 recounts this pivotal moment. On the first day of the 7th month, all the people gathered in the square before the water gate. They asked Ezra to bring out the book of the law of Moses and read it aloud. In Nehemiah 8:3 it says, "He read it aloud from daybreak till noon, as he faced the square before the water gate, in the presence of the men, women, and others who could understand. And all the people listened attentively to the book of the law." This was a moment of great reverence, as many had never heard God's law before. The reading was accompanied by explanations from the Levites to ensure everyone clearly understood the meaning of the text. The people's reaction was one of deep remorse. Nehemiah 8:9 recounts that, upon hearing the law, the people began to weep, recognizing their sins and their separation from God. However, Nehemiah, Ezra, and the Levites encouraged them to celebrate rather than mourn. Nehemiah 8:10 records, "This day is holy to our Lord. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." Thus, the people celebrated with a great feast, sharing food and expressing gratitude to God. This moment of spiritual renewal did not end there. In chapter 9, the people gathered again, this time for a day of fasting, confession of sins, and worship. Nehemiah 9:3 describes, "They stood where they were and read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a quarter of the day, and spent another quarter in confession and in worshiping the Lord their God." This collective confession was followed by a long and heartfelt prayer, acknowledging God's faithfulness throughout history and the people's sins. After this spiritual renewal, the people of Israel made a covenant with God. Nehemiah 10 records the commitments they undertook, such as obeying the law, keeping the Sabbath holy, and supporting the temple. These decisions demonstrated that the spiritual revival had borne tangible fruits, prompting the people to reorganize their lives according to God's will. Nehemiah also continued working to strengthen the stability of the community. He implemented social and religious reforms to ensure the people remained faithful to the covenant. Nehemiah 13 details some of these reforms, such as purifying the temple, reorganizing the system of offerings, and reintroducing the Sabbath as a sacred day of rest. Nehemiah faced resistance to some of these changes, but stood firm, always prioritizing God's will over human opinions. The story of Nehemiah is a timeless example of leadership, faith, and courage. He demonstrated that a true leader not only guides people during crises, but also works to secure a sustainable future founded on justice. Nehemiah was not deterred by challenges, whether external or internal. He remained steadfast in his trust in God and in his determination to do what was right. This narrative also challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Nehemiah teaches us that rebuilding walls, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is possible when we place our faith in God and stay committed to our purpose. Like Nehemiah, we may face criticism, hardships, and distractions, but with courage and focus, we can achieve what seems impossible. And what about you? What wall in your life needs rebuilding? Perhaps it's a broken relationship, a forgotten dream, or even your connection with God. Nehemiah shows us that with faith, planning, and action, no challenge is too great. May we be inspired by this story and seek in God the strength needed to rebuild the walls that uphold our lives and our faith.